Story 1, The House That Bled Crack. I've answered more calls at 3 a.m. than I could ever count. Domestic fights, overdoses, family arguments, gunshots that turned out to be firecrackers, firecrackers that turned out to be gunshots. After 30 years in East Detroit, you learn the smell of trouble long before you see it. But that house on Alta Road, that one never leaves me. The temperature had dropped to minus 15 degrees Celsius. Snow came down in thick, powdery sheets that swallowed every sound. The night was so quiet it felt hollow. Officer Steve Ramsey and I pulled up to a two-story home the color of old nicotine stains, windows boarded from the inside. A neighbor had called in a disturbance, screaming, banging, something that didn't sound human. The first thing wrong? The front door was wide open, hanging crooked, as if someone had kicked it inward with a strength born from panic. The second thing wrong? The smell. A mix of chemical burn, mold, and something rotten beneath it. The kind of scent that makes you swallow twice before breathing again. Place reads like a meth lab, Steve muttered, lifting his collar over his mouth. Reads like something worse, I said, stepping into the living room. Inside, the air was stale and unmoving. Trash piles formed miniature mountains. A TV hissed static to no one. Snow swirled across the tile floor from the open doorway. And from above us came a steady drip, 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 like something was leaking through the ceiling. We did a quick sweep of the first floor. Empty. Except for the overturned sofa and a single shoe lying in the center of the hallway like someone had yanked it off in mid-struggle. We climbed the stairs, our boots creaking on warped wood. At the top landing, the door to the second-floor bedroom rested slightly ajar. A cold draft rolled out. My flashlight beam revealed rope tied around the posts of a metal bed frame, rope that ended abruptly where it had snapped. On the mattress lay a woman, motionless, pale, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if still staring at something she wished she hadn't seen. No blood. No wounds. But her stillness felt heavy, wrong, as if the room itself refused to acknowledge she was gone. Steve whispered, "Nathan, you hear that?" At first I didn't. Then, faintly, a shuffle inside the closet. I raised my voice. "Detroit police. Come out slowly." The closet door swung open with a cracked yelp of its hinges. Derek Razor Malone, a skeletal man with twitching hands and wild, jittery eyes, stumbled forward. He was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. Before we could react, he pressed something cold against my neck. A blade. His breath stank of chemicals and fear. "Don't move," he hissed. "You don't move, nobody gets hurt." Steve froze. My heart hammered, but training kept me still. Then came another sound, soft scraping, from under the bed. I saw fingers curl around the bed frame. Then a figure slid out, Tanya Reed. Skin gray from the cold, eyes glassy, pupils blown wide. She moved oddly, like her joints didn't agree with each other. Her hair hung in clumps that stuck to her cheeks. She crawled toward Steve with unsettling determination. "Tanya, stay down," Steve warned, backing away. She didn't. She moved faster. "Razor, call her off," I growled, steady but firm. "I can't," he whispered. "She isn't listening anymore." What did that even mean? Before Tanya reached Steve, Razor's knife slipped for a split second. That moment was all I needed. I twisted free, pinning his wrist. Steve lunged forward, grabbing Tanya and pulling her upward. She thrashed with surprising strength, as if fueled by pure adrenaline, but Steve held on. "Downstairs," I barked. "We're taking them out, now." We dragged them both to the stairs. Every step groaned under us. Razor sobbed, Tanya muttered nonsense under her breath. I thought we were done. But from above, from the attic, came a thunderous crash. A dark figure burst from the stairwell above us, leaping with unnatural speed. He hit the landing so hard dust exploded upward. A tall man with a shaved head, eyes burning with something far beyond panic. Corey Shaw. He held a large blade in his fist, long, heavy, meant to intimidate more than anything. He didn't swing it, but the way he carried it told me everything. He thought the house belonged to him. That we had trespassed. He roared, "No badges leave my house alive." The sound shook the walls. Snowflakes swirled from the open doorway, carried by a sudden gust of wind. Everything happened too fast. Corey rushed forward, barreling down the stairs with shocking momentum. Steve braced himself, shouting warnings. I pulled Razor and Tanya behind me, stepping hard to intercept. "Stop!" I commanded. He didn't even slow down. Steve fired, controlled, professional, desperate shots meant to stop the charge without harming anyone else in the cramped stairwell. The noise thundered inside the tiny space, echoing down the corridors. Corey staggered but kept coming for several more steps, driven more by force of motion than will. Then he collapsed, sliding on the icy floor where the drifting snow had begun to settle. Silence fell like a curtain. Razor was shaking violently, whispering, "We shouldn't have stayed, we shouldn't have stayed." Tanya stared blankly at the hallway wall as if watching shadows move across it. Steve exhaled shakily. "Nathan, what happened to them?" Inside that house, the cold seemed to deepen, seeping into our bones. The drip from upstairs resumed, steady and relentless. We called for backup. Medics. Cleanup. The whole block filled with flashing lights that danced across the snow. But even outside, with warm air in my lungs again, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house itself had been breathing. And that we had disturbed something barely holding itself together. 30 years on the job, and that night still wakes me. Story 2, the doctor who opened the door from the grave. I've done night shifts in some of the worst corners of Salford, stabbings behind off licenses, junkies clawing at car doors, domestic calls that end with someone going through a window. But nothing has ever hollowed out the center of my chest like that night in the Ellison Medical Building. It was just after midnight. Rain was coming down in sheets, the kind that made the streetlights look like they were drowning. Dispatch told us a motion sensor had tripped inside the old medical complex. Copper thieves, squatters, kids doing TikTok dares, usually one of those. I was with Callum Reed, 5 years on the job and still carrying that naive optimism that the rest of us had lost ages ago. "Easy one," he said as we pulled up. In and out. The building rose out of the fog like a morgue drawer halfway open. Every window was black. Every gutter dripped like the place was bleeding from its seams. And then, right as we stepped out of the patrol car, the front door opened. Not swung open from the wind. Opened. Slowly. Deliberately. A man stepped out. White lab coat. Blood soaked down the front. A hospital ID card clipped to the pocket. Dr. Gregory Ellison. But we didn't know him yet. He didn't blink. Didn't act surprised. Just stared with hollow calm and said, voice low and gravelly, "I'm the key holder. You may enter." Callum and I exchanged a quick look. There was no key holder scheduled. The building was supposed to be sealed and totally unused since 2017. "Sir, what's your name?" I asked, hand hovering near my baton. He didn't answer. He just stepped aside and tilted his head, like someone listening to music through a wall. "Follow me," he said. "I'll show you what needs to be seen. Not what you need to check. Not what triggered the alarm. What needs to be seen." But we followed. Because protocol is protocol, and the worst thing you can do in abandoned structures is lose track of someone who might be hostile. Inside, the temperature dropped like we'd stepped into industrial refrigeration. Our breath fogged instantly. The man's footprints left faint streaks of red on the tiles, but he didn't limp, didn't seem injured. The blood wasn't fresh. It looked dry. Crusted. "Sir, can you stop for a moment?" Callum asked, shining his torch at the stains. The doctor didn't. He glided more than walked, leading us to the elevator hall. Every room we passed was empty. Every door slightly ajar, as if someone had gone through in a rush and never come back. We reached the second floor. The hallway light at the far end flickered like it was breathing, struggling, dying. The rest of the corridor was pitch black. "Motion sensor tripped up here," Callum whispered. We began the systematic sweep. 11 examination rooms. 1 storage closet. One small office. Every room was cold. Too cold. Not winter cold, dead cold. The kind of cold that sinks into your fingertips and makes them ache. Room after room, nothing. No squatters. No signs of break-in. No copper stripped. And somewhere behind us, always, the faint echo of the doctor's shoes on tile, even though he never stayed beside us. By room 8, Callum nudged me. Where did he go? I realized I hadn't heard the footsteps for at least a minute. We finished checking the last room. Everything clean. Everything empty. We turned back toward the hallway and all the doors were open. Every single one. Wide open. We had closed them. Not locked, but firmly shut. Now they were open so wide they looked like they'd been yanked by something huge. The hinges groaned softly, even though nothing moved. Oi, hell no, Callum whispered. Then the last light, the flickering one at the end, went out. Darkness. Pure, suffocating black. Only our torches remained. And then another light came on. A single elevator bulb. Glowing red. The lift hummed. Then dinged. Slow. Wrong. Too slow, like a recording played back at half speed. Ding. The doors creaked open. Empty. But my radio crackled. Soft at first. Then louder. A man's breath. Slow. Deep. Tortured. Coming through loud and clear. Control, did you send someone else? I asked into the MIC. Static. Then the same breath, this time behind us. Callum swung his torch toward the corridor. Nothing. Then something moved in room 3. A shape. Tall. White coat. Head tilted. The doctor. But his feet weren't touching the ground. The torchlight caught the ligature mark around his neck. Deep. Broken skin. Dark purple. Suddenly, the stairwell door at the far end slammed shut on its own, hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Liam, we need to go, Callum whispered through clenched teeth. Yeah. We started backing up the hallway. That's when the front door slammed. The sound traveled through the entire building, metallic, furious. Then. Click. 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 The sound of a bolt sliding into place. The main exit had locked itself from the inside. The radio came alive again. This time not just breathing. A voice. Hoarse. Warped. Squeezed through a throat that didn't work anymore. Don't leave. It wasn't one voice. It was layered. Like someone speaking beside a corpse and the corpse speaking with him. Movement behind us. Too fast. Too quiet. We turned, torches shaking, and saw the doctor standing only 10 feet away. Head still tilted. Eyes wide. Mouth slack. Hanging position impossible but undeniable. I don't remember drawing my baton. I barely remember grabbing Callum and dragging him toward the back stairwell. But we ran. Down the stairs 2 at a time. Through the ground floor corridor. To the lobby. When we reached the front door, it was locked. Not jammed. Locked. Heavy bar slotted into place. And then, the real keyholder arrived. A young woman in NHS scrubs ran up behind the glass, pale as snow, fumbling with her keys. She unlocked the door from the outside and stared at us like she'd seen ghosts. I am sorry, she stammered. I got here as fast as I could. We met Dr. Ellison upstairs, I said. He let us in. Her face crumpled. Tears welled instantly. No, that's not possible, she covered her mouth. Dr. Ellison, he killed himself. 5 days ago. At home. They haven't taken the body down yet. It's still there, until tomorrow. My throat went dry. Then who the hell opened the door for us? Callum whispered. The keyholder shook her head. I don't know. but it wasn't the living Dr. Ellison. We didn't answer. We just stood there, drenched, shaking, staring back at the building's black windows. And in one of them, just for a second, I swear the silhouette of a hanging figure swayed gently side to side, waiting for the next officer to let inside. Story 3. She lived on the ceiling. People think Glasgow's scary because of the knife crime, the gangs, the drunks. But what keeps me awake at night isn't any of those things. It's the woman I met in that abandoned convenience store off Brand Street. The one the locals call the Crawler. It was 2:04 a.m. The rain was sideways, blown by wind that felt like it could peel skin. Dispatch said a vandalism alarm had gone off at the old Govan Minimart, shut down since 2014 after a fire gutted half the stockroom. The place always gave me a bad feeling. Windows boarded. Graffiti everywhere. Roof half collapsed. My torch beam barely cut the darkness. I stepped inside through the busted metal shutter. The smell hit first, a mix of mold, soaked wood, and something metallic, like a butcher's floor that never got washed properly. The aisles were a mess of overturned shelves and soggy cardboard. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling into brown puddles that rippled with every step I took. Then I saw her. A pale face in the second-floor window, pressed against the glass. Grinning. Blood smeared across her chin. I froze. The kind of freeze that stops your breath halfway out of your lungs. "Police!" I shouted out of reflex. My voice echoed unnaturally loud, bouncing around the empty store. The face vanished. I rushed up the back stairwell, and on my taser. The second floor was just a gutted office space, nothing but debris, old wiring, and rain blowing through cracks in the roof. No footprints. No movement. But then, tap, tap, tap. Something knocked on the stairwell door behind me. I whipped around, nearly firing. Nothing. No one. Except when I turned back toward the window, she was there again. Not outside. Inside. Standing at the far end of the room, as if she'd never moved at all. She waved. Slow. Inviting. Like telling me, "Come have a look." I blinked, and she was gone again. "Fuck this," I whispered under my breath. I backed toward the stairs. My radio hissed but no words came through, like someone was holding the button and breathing into it. I reached the stairwell, and stopped. Something glistened on the wall. Long streaks. Like someone had dragged wet fingers down the plaster. Except the streaks were above me, near the ceiling. That's when the hairs on the back of my neck rose. I raised my torch upward. And saw her. Clinging to the ceiling like a spider. Naked. Skin grey-blue. Hands hooked into the plaster with metal spikes hammered through her palms. Feet braced upside down. Her hair hanging down like a curtain of wet ash. Her mouth stretched into a smile far too wide to be human. I stumbled back so hard I hit the railing. She didn't drop. She didn't move. She just stared at me, smiling, blood dripping upward toward her forehead because she was upside down. My breathing turned ragged. "Stay back," I shouted, though my voice cracked like I was a kid again. She blinked, finally, and it was the slowest blink I'd ever seen. When her eyes opened again, they were rolled too far back, nothing but white showing. Then she let go. She didn't fall like a person. More like she folded downward, collapsing silently until she hung inches from my face. Her smile was so close I could see the gaps where teeth should have been. See the cuts on her cheeks where the smile had been carved wider. She whispered something. Barely audible. But I heard it because it was right by my ear. "You climbed up here, so I came down." I fired my taser point blank. The probes hit. Her body convulsed, once. Then she stood perfectly still. Eyes wide. Smile still carved across her face. No human on Earth could stay upright after 50,000 volts. But she did. I bolted down the stairs and didn't stop until I reached the ground floor, slipping on wet tiles and hitting my shoulder hard. My radio screamed with static again. Through it, layered voices, men, women, children, whispered my name. Sarah. Sarah. You saw her. Now she sees you. I shoved the radio away and ran for the exit. Before I got there, a figure stepped into view behind one of the broken shelves. Her. Bent backward at the waist like her spine had snapped. Arms dangling. Head hanging so low her hair brushed the tiles. Still smiling. She scuttled sideways along the wall without using her hands. Like her joints had been rewired wrong. Stay back. I screamed again, drawing my firearm this time. She rushed forward. I fired 2 warning shots into the ceiling. The sound boomed through the store. Dust rained down. I expected her to dive or flinch. She didn't. She froze. Tilted her head. And then lowered herself onto all fours, limbs twisted like a broken marionette. Her smile never faded. I ran to my patrol car. Fumbled the keys. Slammed the door shut. Heart racing. Rain pounding the windshield. Breath fogging the glass. I started the engine. And heard the back door click open. I turned slowly. Terrified of what I'd see. She was sitting in the back seat. Calm. Perfectly still. Head tilted slightly. Smiling at me in the rearview mirror. I aimed my gun. She didn't react. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. I radioed for backup, voice shaking so badly I could barely speak. I floored the accelerator, heading straight to the station. I didn't look at her again, not directly. But every time I glanced at the mirror, her eyes were locked onto mine. Unblinking. Unmoving. Mouth twitching every few seconds like she was chewing invisible meat. When I finally screeched into the station car park, I jumped out and aimed my weapon at the back door. 4 officers rushed in behind me and ripped the door open. The seat was empty. Bone dry. No signs of anyone ever being there. But the seatbelt was pulled tight across the cushion. As if someone had been sitting, buckled in, for the entire drive. They tested me for substances. Made me file 3 separate reports. No one believed me. Except Sergeant McKenna. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even ask for extra detail. Just said quietly. People in Govan say she lives on the ceiling. And gets in any car she wants. I still patrol that district. And sometimes, passing the abandoned store, I see movement in the 2nd floor window. A pale face. Pressed against the glass. Smiling. Waiting for me to come back inside. Story 4, The Circle of Masks. People joke that night patrols in rural Georgia are boring. They picture deer crossing, speeding cars, kids sneaking out. Nothing dangerous. Nothing strange. They don't picture the masks. I've been with Floyd County Sheriff's Office for 7 years when it happened. A foggy stretch of Highway 27, just past Silver Creek. Pine trees on both sides. No houses. No lights. Nothing but stillness and that thick Appalachian mist that muffles every sound. It was 3:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because the dashboard clock flickered, just once, like the battery hiccuped. That was the first thing that felt off. The second thing was the silhouette that darted across the road. Human-shaped. Too fast to be a deer. Too controlled to be random. I hit the brakes, the cruiser skidding slightly on damp asphalt. Dispatch, Cole, I said into the radio. Possible pedestrian on County Road 14 near the bend. Checking it out. The fog swallowed my headlights as I stepped out. The air was cold, the kind that bites your nose. I pulled my torch, sweeping the beam across the tree line. Branches. Ferns. Fog. Nothing else. I walked maybe 10 feet in when the forest seemed to shift in temperature, like stepping into a room someone had just walked out of, carrying their breath with them. Then I heard it. A soft tap tap tap. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Metal against earth. My instincts screamed at me to get back in the car, but training kept me moving. And that's when they appeared. 12 figures. Arranged in a perfect circle around me, each one standing at equal distance, like they'd rehearsed it. Every person wore a smooth white mask without eyes, nose, or mouth. Just blank. Porcelain-like. Reflecting the torchlight in a way that made them look almost floating. Long dark robes brushed the forest floor. Not costumes. Not cheap plastic capes. Something heavier. For a few seconds, the only sound was my pulse pounding in my ears. "Sheriff's office," I called out, trying to steady my voice. "Remove the masks. Let me see your hands." None of them moved. Then 6 of them slowly lifted long-handled tools, axes, maybe, or something shaped like them, the blades covered with cloth wrapping. Not swinging, not threatening, just holding them upright. 3 others raised machete-like silhouettes, and the rest wore chains looped loosely around their arms. The chains shifted with a soft metallic sigh. Still no words. Just breathing. Too synchronized to be normal. Too steady to be natural. "Drop all items," I ordered again, louder. Instead, they tapped their tools to the ground, all at the same time. Tap. 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 Slow. Measured. Like a ritual beat. My hand went to my holster automatically. That was when one figure stepped out of the circle. Their mask tilted slightly, like studying me. When they spoke, their voice was muffled through fabric, low, rough, distorted by the mask. "Wrong night to wear the badge, deputy." I froze. Not because of what he said, but because of how calmly he said it. No hostility. No rush. Just a statement. Like observing the weather. I lifted my radio. "Dispatch, I need immediate backup at." Static. Not the usual kind. This was a soft, whispering static, like someone lightly brushing their fingers over the microphone. I felt them all breathing. Heard it inside their masks. A collective, slow inhale that sounded too uniform to be natural. The leader raised a hand. Instant silence. Every figure went completely still, like mannequins waiting for instruction. Then the leader spoke again, voice drifting low and steady. "Leave, or become the 13th. My mouth went dry. Hands trembled. Training said hold your ground. Instinct said run. Instinct won. I stepped back slowly. No one followed. No one flinched. Then I turned and ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I sprinted harder than I ever had, breaking through bushes and stumbling onto the road. I pounded toward the cruiser, shoes scraping wet asphalt. I didn't look back. Not until I slammed the door shut and locked it. My headlights flooded the road again, and the fog parted just enough for me to see them. All 12 figures now stood in a straight line across the road, as if transported there. Perfectly still. Perfectly spaced. Masks reflecting the beams. The leader stood at the center. Head slightly tilted. Watching. I floored the accelerator. The cruiser roared forward, engine whining as the tires fought for traction. For a split second, the figures vanished into the fog. When I broke through to clear a road 2 miles later, my hands were still shaking on the wheel. Only then did I call for backup. When the SWAT team arrived 20 minutes later, they found nothing alive or human in the area. But they did find something. Perfectly arranged in the middle of the roadway was a circle of disturbed earth, 12 equally spaced impressions, like footprints or standing marks. And in the very center, 12 white masks, laid neatly side by side. One of them had a dark stain across the lower half, fresh, still tacky. The lab later said it was biological material consistent with human tissue, but couldn't determine anything more specific. I didn't have any wounds when I left the scene. But during the debrief, someone pointed out a long, shallow slice on the back of my uniform shirt. A clean cut through fabric.